Hello viewers, I'm Daniel Kasahun with this edition of the program that presents CEO Nicolas Pompigne-Mognard, founder of APO Group. He is here to brief us some points about his company's activities and his perspectives about journalism in Africa. APO Group is a company that provides media relations consultancy and press release distribution services in Africa and in the Middle East. Welcome to ETV Studio.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
Thank you very much for your time. First, can you tell us in brief about how you are able to organize this company?
Well, I didn't actually start it as a business. I was a correspondent for an African media. I was a correspondent in Paris. I was covering Europe, working for Gabon News, which is a media outlet based in Gabon, Central Africa. And as soon as I was appointed,
but you are a lawyer by profession.
Well, I'm not a lawyer. I study law.
You study law?
I study law, but I'm not a lawyer.
All right.
And so as soon as I was appointed, I started to contact all the institutions and organizations based in Europe to receive their news releases, receive their press releases, to keep abreast of all the actuality and news which was happening, Africa-related news which was happening in Europe, because I was supposed to report on cultural news, sport news, political news, diplomatic news, etc. So I started to subscribe and contact all these organizations to receive their news releases, and I find it extremely difficult. So it led me to a question, which is, okay, if it is so difficult for me to receive the press releases of the European institution, is it difficult for the international media to receive the press release issued by the African and Pan-African institutions? So I did a few tests. I actually tried to receive as many press releases as possible issued by the African institution, and I find that it was even more difficult. Now the conclusion was that most of the time the press releases, the news releases issued by the Pan-African Parliament, the African Union Commission, the African Development Bank, and all our regional organizations were never actually reaching the international media community. Now, at the time, I had a series of discussions with the president of the African Development Bank, which was at the time Donald Kaberuka, and he told me something which really resonated and which actually led me to actually create that activity. And he told me that the dissemination of the information related to the economy of the continent actually participates to the development of the continent. In other words, you want the people outside of Africa, in the US, in the UK, in China, to know that Africa is not only about hunger and misery, etc., but there is a middle class, there is startups, there is some country growing very fast, etc., etc. We need to share that news to the world. In other words, we need to give the ability for Africa to share its voice across the world. So what I did is that I subscribed to all the press releases I could gather issued by African organizations and institutions.
Where does this determination come from? You worried a lot about Africa.
Well, I think first of all,
you
need to remember that back in 2007, 8, etc., the whole narrative about Africa, if you took 100% of the news coverage, the media coverage globally about Africa, first of all, 80% of it was negative. I mean, I have to remind you the front page of The Economist titled Africa the hopeless continent. That was the whole narrative at the time. And the other thing is that
at that time that was the reality in Africa. There were lots of conflicts, lots of hunger, and lots of miseries.
Yes, well, Africa is not a country, and at the time already there was some country which were doing better than others. At the time already, it wasn't hunger and misery everywhere. At the time already, our institutions, like the African Development Bank, started to identify the beginning of an emerging middle class in Africa. Problem is, nobody was talking about it. Problem is, the international media were focusing on bad news. Problem is, there was no good news available. Problem is, you could look a media in the eyes an international media, and ask him, okay, why are you always talking about the bad news? Why don't you see the good news? And that media, that journalist, will be at the time in position to tell you where are the good news.
Because that has to be prioritized
What
in
do you
order
mean?
to save life. If somebody is hungry, if somebody is in conflict, you give priority to solve immediate problems.
I'm very well aware about the concept like communication for development, etc. But it's a matter of narrative. When you focus only on bad news, you convey a bad messaging, and you convey a bad image of the continent across the world, and eventually, it's a circle. Who wants to invest on a continent where, when I'm pushing the button on the TV, it's all bad news, right? So the idea was to change the narrative, to rebalance the narrative, and the idea was to make neutral news and/or good news available to the international media, so they can see that it wasn't all bad.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We created a feed of news releases. For instance, the African Development Bank or the IMF or whatever state that next year the growth of the continent will be 3.5 or 4.2, etc. I mean, media needs to know. Right. So we need to send them the content. And sometime, and back in 2007-8, we actually did what we actually did. We take those good news and we just put them somewhere. They cannot ignore it anymore. So they have to rebalance the narrative.
That's right, but we claim all these growths in Africa in the past years with lots of deaths of African countries.
Well, I'm afraid that's another question. I'm afraid maybe that's a question you want to ask economists. If you ask me, the role of the media in that dynamic, in the role of the media in the development of the continent, not only the African media, but also the international media, I'm coming back to what I just said. If we want to attract investors, if we want to develop Africa and the countries, if we want to have better education, etc., we need a strong media landscape and we need a positive narrative. And we are in 2019. The facts I'm referring to, which the situation where we were when I created APO, it was like 12 years ago. I mean, between 2007 when I created APO and now, we had the whole narrative about Africa rising, remember? We had those announcements that in 2008 or something like that, Africa was one of the continents which actually resisted the more to the global crisis. We had the first announcement on the fact that we have the Ashish Dakar of Africa, which were the youngest billionaire. We have the announcement that Aliko Dangote is the richest black man alive globally. We have the emergence of the EcoBank. We have the emergence of the Dangote Group. We have a country, Ethiopia, which during the last 10 years is recorded a 8.5% growth, which is I mean, amazing. So I mean, you need to understand, we were in 2007. It seems like it was yesterday, but in terms of narrative about Africa, it was basically all negative. And the point and the mission was to change the narrative. The first thing I did was to subscribe to, as I said, the press release from African Development Bank and institution, etc. And I created a feed of news releases. And do you know who was our first partner? When I had that feed of content, all this news about how the economy was, the emerging middle class, etc. I went to Bloomberg, and I said to Bloomberg, listen, you don't have any content related to Africa you are offering on your Bloomberg terminal. The Bloomberg terminal is that service which is managed by Bloomberg and which provides data in all the stock exchanges across the world. Okay? And I told them, you don't have any Africa-related content. I'm offering you a feed of content related to Africa. You're going to be able to offer that to your clients and to the stock exchange across the world. Here is the last statement by the President of the African Development Bank forecasting the growth of the continent for next year. Here is information about the growth of Ethiopia. Here is information about the opportunity in terms of in the field of logistics, in the field of e-commerce. Here is the level of adoption of the mobile which is forecasted for the next 5 years. Look at it from New York, look at it from Washington, look at it from Beijing, look at it from Moscow for France. Maybe it's going to change your mind. Maybe you're going to see some potential. Maybe you're going to stop only focusing on hunger and etc. etc. Maybe you're going to see that, and of course right now everybody knows it. What I'm about to say, everybody knows it, but at the time it wasn't like that. Everybody knows right now that out of the 10 fastest growing economy in the world, 7 are in Africa. But at the time it wasn't like this. So we had to share with the world those information to rebalance the narrative. So you asked me how and why I created APO at first. It was for that. I didn't create it as a business. I created to rebalance the narrative about Africa.
Yeah. Can we mention some specific results of your company? What are your landmark achievements so far?
Well, honestly, it's difficult to choose because we are growing so fast. We are doing so many things that I mean, we have reason to celebrate on a weekly basis. You asked me about an achievement, I will give you one. The first one which come to my mind. A few months ago in July, APO Group signed a strategic partnership with a company called Getty Images. Getty Images, which maybe is not very well known in Africa, but Getty Images is actually
it's well known.
Okay, good.
We get
good, excellent. But in some country they are not so popular. I mean, and so Getty Images is the leading visual company. Basically, they are the leading photo press agency. Let's put it that way. Let's put it simply to put it simply. And they are extremely influential. I mean, all the newsroom across the world has a contract, a subscription with Getty Images. So through that partnership, what we are doing, amongst other things, it's a very comprehensive partnership, but amongst other things, what we are doing is that all the pictures, but also, Daniel, all the press releases distributed by APO, and you know very well, Daniel, that usually the news releases are good news. You know, all this content about the appointment of a new CEO here, that company which is expanding here, that company which is launching their new service here, that growth which is forecasted in that country here, all this good news will be made available to all Getty Image subscribers across the world. This is a huge achievement. We are very proud about it. And if I have to summarize it like a joke, I would say that APO Group and Getty Images are partnering to change the image of Africa, one image at a time. And it's working.
But don't you see that people can easily, directly get access to the organizations to get the information? For instance, in order to get information from the African Development Bank,
sure,
I can
absolutely
get directly to their website.
Absolutely, you can do it. You can do it. I will make just one comment. APO Group, our viewers can do it actually now. You can browse on internet Africa Newsroom, and you're going to find a website which is called africanewsroom.com. On that website, you have a button which is called Source at the top. Just click on the button. What you're going to see the 750 sources, meaning the 750 organizations which are distributing their press releases through APO Group. So yes, you can find the press release of the African Development Bank on their website, absolutely. But if you are a journalist, there is only one website where you can go and with a click of the button, run a search which is going to display all the press releases related to Ethiopia, for instance, issued by 750 organizations, ranging from, yes, the African Development Bank, but what about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Belarus? What about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of India? Do you know that these governments are very active in Africa? How would you know that maybe the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iran, which we are distributing the press release, is planning to travel to Ethiopia in 2 weeks? You have those information on African News.
Yeah, we can access this from the embassy's portal.
Of course you can access it, but it's already cooked up for 750 sources. Of course you can access it. You can do it on yourself. You know, you don't have to go to the restaurant. You can cook in your kitchen if you want. But you know, that's what we do for the last 12 years.
All right. And you have the ambition to assist private and public organizations in sharpening their reputation and increasing their brand equity in target countries. Who are your target countries in Africa, and what have you done so far?
So obviously you are referring to one of our activity, which is APO communication, which is indeed, as I said, a Pan-African communication consultancy. The targets depend on our clients, but more importantly, as I said, APO communication is a Pan-African communication consultancy. What that means is that we are Pan-African, meaning we are providing our services on a Pan-African scale. So I want to give you an example. One of our clients,
does it include the Middle East, Pan-African?
Yeah, absolutely. We manage a media list of 400,000 contacts. Remember, initially...
I mean Pan-African is for Africa.
What do you mean? 54 countries of Africa?
Yeah.
Yes, we have a list. We have a media list of 400,000 contacts, which is covering all 54 countries of Africa.
Okay.
And that's what we are doing for our clients. We are distributing their press releases on a Pan-African scale. And I understand your surprise. But because we are the only one to do that. But I mean, we have, as we speak, 5 people working full-time on our media lists. We started 12 years ago. We are the leader in what we are doing. And so, what I was about to say is about the fact that we are Pan-African. I was about to mention that example of one of our clients, Fly Dubai. Fly Dubai is obviously an airline company. It's a sister company of Emirates. Fly Dubai is specialized in what they call untapped destination, which means what that means. And so recently Fly Dubai opened a new destination. Destination was Asmara in Eritrea. A few months after, they're opening another destination in Africa. Destination is Hargeisa, Somaliland. We manage the PR for those 2 openings. We manage the entire operation. My point is, organizing a press conference in Kenya, or distributing a press release in Kenya, or organizing an interview in Kenya, organizing a speaking opportunity in Kenya, publishing an op-ed in Kenya, for us, it's our daily bread and butter. We do that all the time. And we do it on a Pan-African scale, including in countries like Eritrea and Somaliland.
How about the challenge?
Sorry?
The challenge you faced.
Well, we are facing multiple challenges.
Can you mention?
Depending on the countries. But challenge in what regards do you mean?
When you do your job, you may face some challenges.
Honestly,
and financially,
the company has
the organization.
The company has no debt. The company is going very fast. I own 100% of the company. I'm the founder, as you know. I mean, the challenge is to manage the growth, I will say. When you have a company which provides the right service at the right moment on a market which is growing, your challenge as an entrepreneur is to find the right balance. You don't want to go too fast. You don't want to break the machine. So the challenge will be, for instance, talent management. You need to find the right people, for instance. It's not really a challenge, but it's definitely something which is important. But as we speak, the company APO Group, I cannot say that we are facing any big challenges really.
And you give speeches and presentations to journalism and public relations students. And how was your deliberation with the Addis Ababa University students? Would you mention some specific points?
Well, first of all, it's not a one-way discussion. It's not. I mean, it's not a one-way lecture. I'm launching, discussion, and then I would say I'm learning from them as much as they are learning from you. So we are discussing about two topics. The first part of the conference is about the international media which are investing in Africa, and we're asking ourselves that question. There is a lot of international media investing in Africa. Is it a good news for the continent?
Like the BBC, Al Jazeera?
Like the BBC, like Al Jazeera, like Washington Post, we just...
Anadolu of Turkey?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're here.
But you have so many. And so we are discussing about that. We are wondering, we're asking ourselves if it is a good news for the continent. And the second part of the conference is from journalist to entrepreneur, how a journalist can become an entrepreneur, because that's what I did. So I'm discussing that with those students, and I may say that the students
How about the presence of international media here? Is this good news or bad news?
Well, I'm not in my conferences. I'm not focusing on one country. It's really Africa, because truly so far I haven't found one country which do not face where the media landscape do not face the exact same challenges as in the other country. I mean, all the media landscapes in all the countries, African countries, are actually facing the exact same challenges. So let me explain.
So you told them that that's good news, or
you want the conclusion, right?
Yeah.
You want the conclusion. What I told them is that there is a challenge coming, a big one, a big one, and I told them that they cannot ignore it, and I told them that it will be tomorrow, in a few months, there will be journalists, they will be there. They are the future of the profession. It's up to them to answer a few questions. We know for a fact, because there are market studies, that there is more and more African watching international media and disregarding national media. I asked them that question. Why? We need to ask ourselves why, and we need to fix it, because if you are not fixing it, what's going to happen is that all those multinational companies which are investing in Africa, they come with big advertising budgets. But if in 3 years, 4 years, you tell those international companies, you don't have to advertise on Ethiopian Broadcasting Corporation, because actually, if you advertise on CNN, you're going to have more viewers, because Africans are spending more time watching CNN than Ethiopian Broadcasting Corporation. Then that kind of situation, that kind of trend could raise a lot of very complicated questions, ranging from digitalization, ranging from talent management. When international media are coming to Africa, it's a brain drain. You were referring to BBC. BBC opened their largest office outside of the UK. They didn't open it in Washington or in Paris or Beijing. They opened it in Nairobi. It's an investment of 270 million. They hired 300 journalists, and they hired the best. So it's a brain drain. So we need to keep in mind that we need to keep in mind that media are companies. They need money. They need to invest. They need to pay their talents, etc., etc. And the African media are facing a lot of challenges. They are facing the same challenges as the global media landscape, namely digitalization, talent management, and finding the right model, to make money. But on top of that, they are facing new challenges. I'll give you one, which I just explained, which is that EBC competitors, as we speak, are not the next Ethiopian TV anymore. EBC main competitor right now is BBC, is CNN, is Al Jazeera. How do you fight against such an opponent, such opponents? Do you know, I was at BBC headquarters last week, and I had a meeting there. I learned something. I knew I had a sense of it, but I never figured out it was so big. So there is a country, I'm asking you that as a question, Daniel. You know the media landscape. So I'm asking you that question. I'm telling you, there is a country in the world which represents on its own 25% of the global audience, the overall global audience, the worldwide audience of BBC. Do you know what is that country which represents 25% of the global audience of BBC? This is Nigeria, Daniel. Isn't it amazing? I mean, amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Amazing in a sense, I don't know in what sense, but is it a good news? I'm not sure. So there is a big challenge coming. I don't think, I'm already, we're already old, right? We don't have white, you don't have white hair, but I do have white hair, so I don't think it's up to me to fix it. But that's why I'm going to the students and I'm telling them tomorrow it will be up to you to play your part and to face that challenge, because it's coming.
So how do you gauge the status of journalism and the status of public relation activities in Africa?
Well, journalism and public relation activities are in terms of industry, they are very different. I mean, I know that in universities, etc., the curriculum sometimes, etc. But then when you really look at them as industry, they are a little bit different. And the PR industry may do well when the journalism industry or the media landscape may be struggling. So clearly, if I want to answer your question, I really need to answer separately. The PR industry in Africa, I think, is evolving a lot and fast. The multinational PR agencies, so I'm referring to the Edelman, the Fresh Manila, the In & Knowlton, the Wagner Edstrom, and so on. They arrived in South Africa back in 2000, end of 2000, 2005, 6, 8, 7, etc. And they established offices in South Africa. They were following those multinational companies which were coming in Africa, and when at the time when a multinational happened to want to arrive in Africa, they opened an office in South Africa, and they are good. They're not looking for expansion or whatever. Until recently now, I mean, they all want to expand. They all want to go to Ethiopia, to Ghana, to Nigeria, etc., etc. And so they're asking their PR agencies to follow them. And most of the time, the PR agencies are unable to follow. So they tried a few models. The PR agency tried to partner with local PR agencies. So I'm a PR agency based in South Africa. I will try to partner with a PR agency based in Nigeria or in Ethiopia.
Yeah, the African media is operating with the problem of this free media. Media freedom is not there in most of the African countries.
So now we are talking about another subject, right?
Yeah.
Which is the freedom of the press and the media landscape.
In question.
I would tell you one thing which I stress systematically with all the students I meet everywhere. I meet students because during all my conferences with students, there is always one or two students which are telling me, okay, well, in my country, and remember, I'm doing those conferences in different countries. In my country, the situation is specific. You don't understand, Mr. Pompigne-Mognard. In my country, it's different. All of them are saying that in different countries. They all believe in their country, respective country, that the situation is different. They tell, you don't understand. In my country, the situation is different. The media are owned by politics and also by all sorts of interests. And the media are biased. And you cannot say everything you want, and etc., etc., etc. Well, my message to them, it's always the same. Have a look to who own the media landscape in France, which is a democracy, right? Mm-hmm. Have a look at the media landscape in the US and tell me Fox News is not biased. Mm-hmm. Tell me Al Jazeera is not biased. I mean, it is just undermining ourselves to say, okay, but you don't understand. In my country, it's different. In my country, journalists cannot do everything they want. Well, man, look on the internet. Look what's happening in other countries which are allegedly big democracies. In France, for instance, most of the media landscape is owned by 3 or 4 people. There are billionaires people and they own the media landscape. Do you think those media will publish a story against those guys or their political friends?
So you mean context matters?
Context matters? No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is when you want to fix a problem, you don't start by saying, well, poor me. I'm the only one having that problem, and I will never be able to fix it. You know, you just take charge.
Well, that was Nicolas Pompigne-Mognard, founder of APO Group. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
And viewers, see you next time with yet another edition of the program from ETV Language. Bye bye.